Chapter 1. The shattered silhouette the digital clock on Claire's nightstand, and glowed 3:00 a.m., a stark, accusatory red in the predawn darkness. The silence of their bedroom, usually a comforting blanket, now felt like a suffocating shroud. David wasn't beside her. A familiar knot of dread tightened in her stomach. It had been happening more often lately, these nocturnal disappearances, always with some flimsy excuse about a late night work call or an urgent client email. But tonight a colder, more insidious truth gnawed at her. She slipped out of bed, the plush carpet soft beneath her bare feet. The house was still, save for the hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen. Moonlight filtered through the living room windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with her rising anxiety. As she neared David's home office, a sliver of light escaped from under the door. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of impending doom. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Claire pushed the door open. David was there, silhouetted against the glow of his computer screen, his back to her. But he wasn't working. The soft, intimate murmur of a voice, unmistakably female, wafted from his headphones. He chuckled, a low, private sound that sent a jolt of ice through Claire's veins. "Lena," he whispered, his voice laced with an affection that had long been absent from their interactions. "You're incredible." The name hit Claire like a physical blow. Lena, their neighbor, her supposed friend. A gasp escaped Claire's lips, involuntary and ragged. David stiffened, spinning around, his face a mask of shock and then resignation. His eyes, usually so warm and familiar, were now distant, guarded. "Claire," he said, his voice flat. He pulled off his headphones, the tinny sound of Lena's continued laughter fading into the silent room. "Lena," Claire repeated, the word a raw whisper of disbelief. "You're with Lena." He didn't deny it. He just sat there, slumped in his chair, his gaze fixed on some point beyond her, beyond them. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths and the crumbling remains of their 15-year marriage. How long? She finally managed, her voice barely audible. He sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound. "A few months. It just happened. It happened." Claire's voice rose, cracking with a pain so profound it felt like a physical tearing. "David, we built a life together. We have Maya." At the mention of their daughter, Maya, a flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossed his face. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by that same distant detachment. "I know," he said, rubbing his temples. "I'm sorry, Claire. I really am. Sorry." The word felt like a hollow mockery. It wasn't just a betrayal of their vows. It was a betrayal of every shared dream, every quiet moment, every future they had meticulously planned. The empire he had built, their life together, felt like it had been stolen from beneath her, piece by agonizing piece. And the thief wasn't some shadowy stranger. It was the woman who lived 2 houses down, the woman whose children played with Maya in their shared backyard, the woman who had often sat at her kitchen table, sharing coffee and confidences. The shock eventually gave way to a cold, burning rage. Claire stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time in months. The comfortable familiarity that had once defined their connection had been replaced by a stranger's face, etched with deceit. "Get out," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Get out of my house." He looked surprised, a hint of protest in his eyes. "Claire, where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," she spat, pointing a shaky finger towards the door. "Just go now." He rose slowly, a defeated slump to his shoulders. As he walked past her, he hesitated, as if to touch her, but she recoiled. The touch would have been unbearable. He left the room, leaving behind the lingering scent of his cologne and the stench of her shattered trust. Claire stood in the middle of his office, the faint glow of the abandoned computer screen illuminating the wreckage of her life. The world tilted on its axis, and she felt a sickening lurch as everything she had known, everything she had believed in, came crashing down. The 3 AM betrayal. It wasn't just David and Lena. It was the betrayal of her own naivety, her own unquestioning trust. And in that moment, in the desolate quiet of the early morning, Claire knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't just survive this. She would reclaim every single piece of herself, and then some. Chapter 2. The aftershocks and the unveiling the days that followed were a blur of raw emotion and logistical nightmares. David did leave, initially to a hotel, then to a rented apartment across town. The house, once filled with the comfortable cacophony of family life, was now eerily silent, amplifying the ringing in Claire's ears from the constant ache in her chest. Maya, their 10-year-old daughter, was the hardest part. Claire tried to shield her from the full ugliness of the situation, explaining simply that Daddy needed some space, that he was living somewhere else for a while. Maya, perceptive and sensitive, sensed the shift, the unspoken tension that hung heavy in the air. She asked questions Claire couldn't fully answer, her innocent eyes mirroring Claire's own pain. Is Daddy mad at us? She asked one evening, fiddling with her dinner. Claire knelt beside her, pulling her close. No, sweetie, Daddy's not mad at us. Sometimes grown-ups have to figure things out, and it's not always easy. But no matter what, Daddy and Mommy both love you very, very much. The lie tasted bitter, but it was a necessary one, for now. Word of the separation inevitably reached the neighborhood. Claire felt the weight of whispered glances, the hesitant inquiries from well-meaning friends. She saw Lena from a distance once, getting into her car, and the sight sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. The woman looked carefree, oblivious to the destruction she had wrought. This infuriated Claire even more. Her best friend, Richard, was her rock, a witty, kind-hearted lawyer who had been a constant in her life since college. Richard was the first person she called after David left. He arrived within the hour, a comforting presence, listening patiently as Claire poured out the entire agonizing story, tears streaming down her face. He's an idiot, Claire, Richard said, his voice laced with indignation. A complete and utter fool, and Lena, I always thought she was a bit too sweet to be true. He was practical, too. We need to get ahead of this, Claire, for your sake and for Maya's. We need to talk about divorce. The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Divorce, it solidified the end of an era, the permanent fracturing of their family unit, but it also offered a glimmer of hope, a path towards reclaiming her life. I don't know where to start, Claire admitted, feeling overwhelmed. That's what I'm here for, Richard said, his hand resting reassuringly on her arm. First, we gather information, financials, assets, everything. David might try to play dirty, especially if Lena's in his ear, and play dirty he did. A week later, David's lawyer sent a formal letter requesting an amicable separation and a fair division of assets. It sounded benign enough, but Richard immediately spotted the subtle manipulations. David was trying to downplay his financial contributions, hinting at Claire's supposed lack of involvement in his business success. He's trying to make it seem like he built everything, and you just rode his coattails. Richard explained, his brow furrowed as he read through the letter. This is classic. We need to prove your instrumental role in his empire, as he likes to call it. Claire scoffed. Instrumental, I was his sounding board, his unpaid assistant, his event planner, his emotional support, and the primary caregiver for our daughter while he was out building his empire. He wouldn't have gotten half as far without me. Exactly, Richard said, a glint in his eye. And we're going to make sure the court knows that. The process of uncovering the truth about David's financial dealings became a daunting task. He had always been secretive about his business, attributing it to proprietary information. Now, Claire understood why. As Richard delved deeper, they discovered that David had been steadily funneling funds into a separate, untraceable account, seemingly for personal use, but more likely to hide assets from their marital estate. He also found evidence of lavish gifts to Lena, expensive jewelry, designer clothes, even a down payment on a new car. The betrayal felt even deeper, more calculating. One afternoon, while searching through old files in David's abandoned home office, Claire stumbled upon a hidden compartment in his desk. Inside, nestled among old business cards and forgotten notes, was a small, velvet-covered diary. Her heart pounded as she opened it. It was Lena's. The entries were a sickening chronicle of their affair, detailing clandestine meetings, whispered confessions of love, and Lena's growing influence over David's business decisions. There were even veiled references to David's attempts to undermine Claire's reputation among their mutual friends. Lena had clearly been feeding him lies, painting Claire as cold, uncaring, and unsupportive of his vision. Claire's hands trembled as she read. The words on the page were a testament to the extent of the betrayal, not just from David, but from Lena, her supposed friend, who had actively conspired to dismantle her life. The final entry, scrawled in Lena's elegant handwriting, chilled Claire to the bone. Soon, my love, soon his empire will be ours. The diary was a smoking gun, a brutal unveiling of the depths of their deceit. It was no longer just about a husband's infidelity, it was about a calculated scheme to usurp her life, her home, her very identity. And in that moment, staring at Lena's brazen confession, Claire felt a surge of cold, unwavering resolve. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a fight for her future, a battle for her stolen legacy. Chapter 3. The courtroom crucible. The courtroom felt like a crucible, a sterile, unforgiving space where the intimate details of her shattered life were laid bare for public consumption. Claire sat beside Richard, her back ramrod straight, her gaze fixed on the judge. Across the aisle, David sat with his lawyer, a smug, overly confident man with a penchant for theatrical gestures. Lena was conspicuously absent, a fact that both frustrated and emboldened Claire. The initial proceedings were a grueling dance of legal formalities, motions, and counter-motions. David's lawyer painted a picture of Claire as an unsupportive spouse, someone who had contributed little to David's financial success, and was now simply seeking to exploit his wealth. He spun narratives of David's entrepreneurial spirit and Claire's supposed disinterest in his business endeavors. Claire felt a hot flush of indignation rise in her cheeks. It was a distortion of their entire marriage. She had poured her heart and soul into creating a stable, loving home, providing the very foundation upon which David had built his career. She had sacrificed her own career aspirations to support his, to raise their daughter, to manage their household with quiet efficiency. When Richard finally called her to the stand, Claire took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked directly at the judge, her voice steady despite the tremor in her heart. She recounted their early years, the sacrifices they both made, the late nights she spent listening to David's ideas, offering feedback, and researching market trends for him. She spoke of the countless times she hosted his business dinners, charming clients and creating a welcoming atmosphere that undoubtedly contributed to his professional relationships. "I wasn't just a wife," Claire stated, her voice gaining strength. "I was a partner. I was the silent force behind his success. While he was out networking, I was ensuring his home life was stable, his daughter was thriving, and that he had the mental space to focus on his empire." David's lawyer tried to discredit her, questioning her understanding of business, suggesting she was merely an emotional support system, not a strategic partner. But Claire, armed with Richard's meticulous preparation, responded with calm precision, citing specific examples of her contributions, her organizational skills, and her insights that had demonstrably helped David's company. Then came the emotional revelations. Richard, with Claire's full consent, presented evidence of David's emotional neglect, the slow erosion of their intimacy, and the eventual discovery of his affair. He spoke of the impact on Maya, the confusion and sadness that now clouded her bright eyes. He described the emotional and psychological toll the betrayal had taken on Claire. During a recess, David approached her, his face a mix of anger and desperation. "Claire, this is getting out of hand. Do you really want to drag all of this through court?" "You started this, David," Claire said, her voice low and steady. "You shattered our lives. I'm just picking up the pieces, and I intend to pick up every single one that's rightfully mine." The next day, Richard unveiled the diary. The courtroom hushed as he presented it as evidence, its velvet cover a stark contrast to the harsh realities it contained. He read excerpts aloud, the words of Lena's confession reverberating through the silent room. The judge listened intently, her expression unreadable. When the passages detailing Lena's explicit intentions to claim David's empire were read, a collective gasp rippled through the gallery. David's face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of shock and fury. He shot a venomous glare at Claire, as if the diary's existence was her fault. "Your Honor," Richard stated, his voice resonating with conviction, "this diary is not merely evidence of infidelity. It reveals a calculated scheme to exploit Mr. Peterson's business, to alienate him from his marital assets, and to disenfranchise my client from her rightful share of what she helped build. This was a premeditated attack on Mrs. Peterson's life and her future." David's lawyer scrambled, attempting to dismiss the diary as a personal item, irrelevant to the financial aspects of the divorce, but the damage was done. The narrative had shifted. It was no longer just about a simple affair. It was about a deeper, more insidious betrayal, a conspiracy orchestrated by Lena with David's complicity. The courtroom drama reached its climax when Maya was briefly called to the stand. Claire had hesitated, fearing the emotional toll it would take on her daughter, but Richard had assured her it was crucial to demonstrate the profound impact of David's actions on their family. Maya, though timid, spoke truthfully about her confusion, her sadness, and how much she missed her mother's consistent happiness. Her innocent words cut through the legal jargon and the lawyer's posturing, reminding everyone of the very real human cost of the betrayal. As Maya stepped down, her eyes met Claire's, and in that moment, Claire felt an overwhelming surge of love and determination. She was fighting not just for herself, but for Maya, for their future, for a life free from the shadow of deceit. The courtroom crucible had tested her, refined her, and in the process hardened her resolve. She was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 4, The Reckoning and Reclaiming the Verdict, was delivered 2 weeks later, not with a bang, but with a quiet, decisive thud of the gavel. The judge, having carefully considered all the evidence, including the damning revelations from Lena's diary, ruled overwhelmingly in Claire's favor. The financial settlement was substantial, reflecting Claire's significant contributions to David's business and acknowledging the emotional distress and professional setbacks she had endured. The court also granted Claire primary custody of Maya, with generous visitation rights for David, emphasizing the importance of both parents in Maya's life, despite the circumstances. Most notably, the judge's ruling included a strong condemnation of the deliberate obfuscation of assets by David and a clear acknowledgement of Lena's malicious interference in the marital estate. David, visibly stunned, sat pale and defeated as the judge read out the terms. His empire, as he so proudly called it, was no longer solely his. Claire had claimed a significant portion of it, not out of spite, but out of justice. The day after the ruling, Claire found a small, hand-written note tucked under her door. It was from Lena. "Claire, I need to talk to you. Please, I know you hate me, but I need to explain." Claire stared at the note, her heart a tangled mess of anger, curiosity, and a strange sense of victory. She debated for hours, discussing it with Richard. "It's a trap," he warned. "She's probably trying to manipulate you, or maybe even blame David. Don't go." But something compelled Claire. She wanted to face her, not out of forgiveness, but out of a need for closure, to look her betrayer in the eye and truly understand the depths of her deception. She agreed to meet Lena at a neutral coffee shop, a place far from their old neighborhood. Lena was already there, hunched over a steaming mug, her usual polished demeanor replaced by a fragile vulnerability. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. "Thank you for coming," Lena said, her voice thin. "I know you have every right to despise me." Claire just nodded, her expression unyielding. "Why Lena? Why David? Why our family?" Lena took a shaky breath. "It started as a professional connection, you know that. He was so charismatic, so driven. He made me feel important, seen, something I wasn't getting from my own marriage." She paused, her gaze distant. "And then he started complaining about you, about how you didn't understand his vision, how you held him back. I listened, and I started to believe him." Claire scoffed, and the diary, the claiming his empire part. Lena flinched. "That was a fantasy, a delusion. I genuinely thought we were meant to be, that we could build something together, professionally and personally. He promised me the world, Claire. He made me believe I was the missing piece in his life, in his business." She looked up, her eyes pleading. "I realize now how incredibly foolish and cruel I was. He played us both. He manipulated me, just as he manipulated you. The explanation wasn't a full absolution, but it offered a glimpse into David's own cunning. He had not only betrayed Claire, but had also exploited Lena's insecurities and ambitions. Claire felt a perverse sense of validation. It wasn't just her fault, or even solely Lena's. David was the master manipulator, weaving a web of deceit around both their lives. "What about your husband?" Claire asked, her voice laced with bitterness. Lena's shoulders slumped. "He left me. He found out about everything. He's divorcing me. I've lost everything, Claire. My home, my marriage, my reputation. Even my job, because of the scandal. I have nothing left." A strange mix of pity and grim satisfaction settled over Claire. Lena's reckoning had arrived. "I don't expect your forgiveness, Claire," Lena continued, her voice breaking. but I needed you to know from me. I am truly, deeply sorry for the pain I caused you and Maya." Claire looked at her, truly seeing the broken woman across the table. Forgiveness was a long way off, perhaps impossible, but understanding, that was a step towards her own healing. "I need to go, Lena," Claire said, rising from her seat. "I have a new life to build." As she walked out of the coffee shop, leaving Lena alone with her regrets, Claire felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The weight of David's betrayal, of Lena's deception, had begun to lift. She had faced them both, confronted the truth, and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. The process of reclaiming her life began in earnest. She sold their large, sprawling house, the one filled with so many painful memories. With the proceeds and her rightful share of the divorce settlement, she bought a smaller, cozier home in a different neighborhood, a fresh start for her and Maya. She also enrolled in business courses, determined to turn her years of informal contributions into tangible skills. She had always been intelligent, organized, and resourceful, and now, fueled by a fierce independence, she was ready to channel those strengths into her own ventures. She started a small online consulting business, drawing on her experience in event planning and project management, and to her surprise, it quickly gained traction. The empire David had so jealously guarded was no longer his alone, nor was it defined by a man. It was now a shared legacy, a testament to Claire's resilience and her unwavering determination to thrive, not just survive. The journey was far from over, but the reckoning was complete, and the reclaiming had truly begun. Chapter 5, Dawn of a New Empire. The scent of fresh paint filled Claire's new office, a small, vibrant space dedicated to her burgeoning consulting business. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating her neatly organized desk and the framed photo of Maya smiling broadly. It had been 2 years since the 3 AM betrayal, 2 years since her world had shattered, and now it was slowly, beautifully, piecing itself back together. Maya was thriving. The move to a new neighborhood, the consistent presence of Claire, and the genuine efforts David was finally making to be a consistent, if less frequent father, had allowed her to bloom. She had new friends, a new school, and a sense of stability that Claire had fought so hard to provide. Claire's consulting business, Claire's Clarity Solutions, was doing remarkably well. She specialized in helping small businesses streamline their operations and improve their client relations, drawing directly from her years of informally managing David's chaotic professional life. She had a growing list of satisfied clients and a renewed sense of purpose. The work was fulfilling, challenging, and entirely her own. It was her empire, built on her terms, free from manipulation and deceit. Richard remained her closest confidant and unwavering supporter. He celebrated every small victory with her, offered advice when she needed it, and simply listened when she needed to vent. He even joked about becoming her first permanent employee. One evening, as Claire reviewed contracts in her office, she paused, a wave of reflection washing over her. She thought of the woman she had been 2 years ago, naive and trusting, completely blindsided by betrayal. She then looked at the woman she was now, strong, independent, and fiercely capable. The journey had been arduous, marked by tears, anger, and moments of despair, but it had also been transformative. She had learned the invaluable lesson of self-discovery. The pain had forced her to look inward, to identify her strengths, to understand her worth beyond her role as a wife. She had discovered a resilience she never knew she possessed, a deep well of inner fortitude that had seen her through the darkest days. David, she heard, was struggling. Lena had moved away, and his business, without Claire's quiet support and keen eye, had plateaued. He had lost some key clients, and his reputation had taken a hit. Claire felt no joy in his misfortunes, only a quiet confirmation that her instincts about his inherent weaknesses had been correct. His empire, built on a shaky foundation of ego and deception, was showing cracks. One day, while out for coffee with Richard, he looked at her with a gentle smile. "You know, Claire, you've really done it. You've not just survived, you've flourished. You've built your own empire, and it's a far more genuine one than David's ever was." Claire smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that reached her eyes. "It's not an empire of power or money, Richard. It's an empire of self, worth, of independence, and of peace, and it's mine." She had faced the betrayal head on, navigated the complexities of divorce, and emerged with her integrity intact. She had fought for her daughter, her home, and her future, refusing to be defined by the actions of others. The emotional revelations had been brutal, but they had paved the way for profound growth. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across her new office, Claire felt a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons learned, for the strength discovered, and for the unwavering love of her daughter and friends. The past, with its bitter taste of betrayal, would always be a part of her story, but it no longer defined her. Claire looked at Maya's photo again, her heart swelling with love. She had not only survived, she had transformed. The childhood that David had unwittingly stolen, the simplicity of her pre-betrayal life, had been replaced by something far more valuable, a hard-earned wisdom, a fierce independence, and the certainty that she was capable of building anything she set her mind to. The dawn of her new empire had truly arrived, and it was glorious. Conclusion, Claire closed her laptop, the soft click echoing in the quiet of her thriving home office. The afternoon sun, now a warm, golden hue, bathed the room in a gentle light. Her empire, once a mere aspiration, was now a tangible reality, not one built on grand structures or vast sums of money, but on the unshakable foundation of her own strength, resilience, and hard-won wisdom. The 3 AM betrayal, which had once felt like a devastating end, had instead been a brutal yet necessary catalyst. It had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths, to shed the illusions of a life that was slowly suffocating her spirit. David's deception and Lena's complicity had stripped away her complacency, revealing the formidable woman she was always meant to be. She had emerged from the ashes of her marriage not just intact, but transformed, an embodiment of the very themes that had defined her journey: betrayal overcome, profound self, discovery, and unwavering resilience. Her daughter Maya, now blossoming with a quiet confidence, was living proof of Claire's fight. Their new home, filled with laughter and peace, was a sanctuary built not on shared history with a betrayer, but on a future forged by Claire's own hands. Richard, her steadfast friend, remained a constant reminder that genuine connection could thrive amidst life's storms. Claire had reclaimed more than just assets or legal standing. She had reclaimed her narrative. The pain of the past was no longer a weight, but a compass, guiding her towards a horizon filled with possibility. She had learned that true empowerment wasn't about controlling others or accumulating wealth for its own sake. It was about owning her story, embracing her power, and defining her own success, one confident step at a time. The dawn of her new empire wasn't just a moment, it was an ongoing, vibrant reality, stretching out before her, boundless and bright.